The fluorescent lights of fast food restaurant buzzed overhead as Kristen wiped down another table. The familiar hum of the fast food restaurant filling her ears. The lunch rush had begun, and customers streamed through the glass doors in endless waves. She moved mechanically, her hands working while her mind wandered to the bitter argument she'd had with her father that morning. The electric bill. Always something about money, about responsibility. His voice had been sharp, cutting through the morning air like a blade. "You promised to pay the electric company bill yesterday. Do you want us to lose power?" She had tried to explain. Work had run late. She couldn't leave her shift. She would handle it today. But his eyes had held that familiar disappointment, that cold judgment that made her feel small and worthless. The glass door chimed again, and through the chaos of ordering customers and crying children, Kristen caught sight of a familiar figure standing just outside. Her breath caught in her throat. Her father stood motionless on the sidewalk, his weathered hands hanging at his sides, his eyes fixed on the restaurant's entrance. He didn't move to come inside, didn't wave or gesture. He simply waited. A chill ran down Kristen's spine despite the warm air circulating through the restaurant. Something about his stillness felt wrong, unnatural. She turned away, focusing on the next customer's order, telling herself she was too busy to deal with whatever he wanted. Let him stand there. She had work to do. "Miss, can I get 2 pieces of chicken?" The customer's voice seemed distant, muffled. Kristen's hands trembled slightly as she punched the order into the register. Through her peripheral vision, she could still see him there, waiting. Just standing in the heat of the afternoon, as motionless as a statue. Other pedestrians walked around him, but he remained fixed in place, his gaze never leaving the restaurant. Hours passed. The lunch crowd thinned, then swelled again with the afternoon wave. Still he stood there. Kristen found herself glancing toward the window every few minutes, her stomach knotting with an emotion she couldn't name. Was it guilt? Anger? Fear? The fluorescent lights flickered once, casting strange shadows across the orange and red interior. In that brief moment of darkness, her father's silhouette seemed to shift, to blur at the edges. "Kristen, you okay?" Her coworker Maria touched her shoulder, concern evident in her voice. "You look pale." "I'm fine," Kristen whispered, but her voice cracked. She excused herself and hurried toward the restroom, her legs feeling weak beneath her. The bathroom was a stark white sanctuary, the harsh lighting making everything seem too bright, too exposed. She splashed cold water on her face, watching the droplets fall into the basin like tears. Her phone rang, the shrill tone echoing off the tiled walls. "Mom." She answered on the first ring. The sound that greeted her was like nothing she'd ever heard before, a wailing primal scream of grief that seemed to tear through the phone line and embed itself in her chest. Her mother's voice was barely recognizable, broken into fragments of anguish. "Your papa. He's gone. He's gone." The phone slipped from Kristen's numb fingers, clattering against the bathroom floor. The room spun around her as the impossible truth crashed into her consciousness. Like a physical blow, her knees buckled, and she grabbed the sink for support. The fluorescent bathroom light flickered again, casting dancing shadows on the white tiles as Kristen's world collapsed around her. Her mother's voice continued to pour through the phone speaker, each word a dagger of reality that she couldn't accept. The hospital. They said it was his heart. He collapsed at the market. They tried everything, but Kristen wasn't listening anymore. Her mind reeled with the impossibility of what she was hearing. Her father was dead, but he was right outside. She had seen him standing there for hours, watching the restaurant with those familiar stern eyes. She snatched the phone from the floor with trembling hands. "Mom, that's not possible. Dad is here. He's outside the restaurant. I can see him." The crying on the other end of the line intensified, and through her mother's broken sobs, she heard other voices, relatives, neighbors, the low murmur of funeral preparations already beginning. "Come home, Anak. Please, come home." Kristen burst through the bathroom door, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate to escape. She ran through the restaurant, past startled customers and concerned co-workers, her vision blurred with tears and terror. The glass doors seemed to move in slow motion as she pushed through them, the afternoon heat hitting her like a wall. She looked toward the spot where her father had been standing. Empty sidewalks stretched before her, dotted with afternoon shadows and scattered litter. No trace of him remained. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the hot concrete, her body shaking uncontrollably. The world around her became a nightmare of sound and color, car horns blaring, people shouting, the distant rumble of traffic. But all she could think about was the figure that had stood there for hours, waiting for something she would never understand. Kristen. What happened? Maria and the other crew members surrounded her, their faces etched with worry and confusion. Through her tears, she tried to explain the impossible, how she had seen her father standing outside while he lay dying miles away, how she had ignored him, too proud and angry to acknowledge his presence, how she had wasted her final chance to speak with him, to make things right, to tell him she loved him despite their arguments. The realization hit her like a physical blow. He hadn't come to argue about the electric bill. He hadn't come to scold her or criticize her work. He had come to say goodbye, and she had turned away. The crew members helped her to her feet, their voices a comforting blur of concern and sympathy. Someone called a taxi. Someone gathered her things, but Kristen felt disconnected from it all, as if she were watching someone else's life unfold from a great distance. As the taxi pulled away from the restaurant, she pressed her face against the window, staring at the empty sidewalk where her father's ghost had kept his final vigil. The setting sun cast long shadows across the pavement, and in those shifting pools of darkness, she could almost see him again standing patiently, waiting for a daughter who would never come out to meet him. The city blurred past in streaks of light and shadow, but Kristen's mind remained trapped in that moment of recognition. Death had come calling at fast food restaurant, and she had been too blind to see its face until it was far too late. The morgue was a place where time seemed to stop, where the fluorescent lights hummed with the same frequency as those at fast food restaurant, but somehow felt colder. Kristen stood beside the metal table, staring down at her father's peaceful face, trying to reconcile the still form with the figure she had seen standing vigil outside the restaurant. The funeral director spoke in hushed tones about arrangements and procedures, but his words faded into background noise. All Kristen could think about was the weight of wasted time, the crushing burden of words left unsaid. The wake stretched across 3 agonizing days. Relatives whispered among themselves, sharing memories and offering hollow condolences. But Kristen remained silent, haunted by the knowledge that her father had tried to reach her one final time, and she had chosen pride over love. On the second night, as she sat alone beside the casket, watching candles flicker in the oppressive darkness, she felt a familiar presence nearby. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees, and the candle flames began to dance without any breeze. She looked up slowly, her heart stopping as she saw him standing in the shadows near the doorway. Her father appeared exactly as he had outside the restaurant, wearing the same clothes, the same expression of patient waiting. But now she could see through him. could see the wall behind his translucent form. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the silent room. He didn't speak, but his eyes held no anger, no disappointment, only a profound sadness that seemed to reach across the divide between life and death. He raised one ghostly hand, and she understood. This wasn't about the electric bill or their petty arguments. This was about forgiveness, about love that transcended even death itself. Tears streamed down her face as she reached toward him, but her fingers passed through empty air. The apparition began to fade, becoming more transparent with each passing second. "I'm sorry, Dad," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry I didn't come outside. I'm sorry for everything." The ghost of her father smiled, then a gentle expression that she hadn't seen in years of arguments and misunderstandings. His lips moved silently, forming words she couldn't hear but somehow understood. "I forgive you, Anak. I love you." Then he was gone, leaving only the flickering candles and the overwhelming scent of jasmine flowers that had been placed around the casket. The burial took place on a gray morning when the sky threatened rain, but never delivered. As dirt was shoveled over the wooden casket, Kristen felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the guilt that had been suffocating her since that terrible day at fast food restaurant. Months passed. She returned to work, but the restaurant never felt the same. Every time she wiped down the tables near the window, she found herself glancing toward the sidewalk, half expecting to see that familiar figure standing in patient vigil. The other crew members noticed her distraction, her tendency to stare at empty spaces as if seeing something they couldn't. They whispered about grief, about trauma, about the way loss could change a person forever. But Kristen knew the truth was more complex than simple mourning. Sometimes, late at night when she walked home from her shift, she could feel eyes watching her from the shadows between streetlights. Sometimes she caught glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision, always just out of clear sight. Love, she had learned, doesn't end with death. It lingers in the spaces between worlds, waiting patiently for recognition, for acknowledgement, for the chance to say goodbye properly. And sometimes, if you're very still and listen carefully, you can hear it calling your name from just beyond the glass doors of memory, forever standing vigil in the place where forgiveness and regret intersect. The dead, it seems, have all the time in the world to wait.